we should move on to one of the next commandments. So before we start, I'm going to read the blessing in English this time. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. You have sanctified us through your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves in things of Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Well, David is trying to get on, and I know he usually likes to do a reading. We'll see how things progress. But today, we're going to start another discussion. If there's somebody who could read Exodus 20, verse 12, if they have that available. If not, I can read it. It's very brief. It says, honor your father and mother, that you may long endure on the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Okay. Let's talk about honor your father and your mother.
Pardon me, Marty, where are we again? Please repeat that.
Exodus 20, verse 12. So, why is it first let's discuss, hi, David. Well, first, before we go into this discussion, David, did you bring something to read today?
Yes, I did. Hello, I'm not in Vail right now. I'm in Montreal.
Okay.
And I hope everybody's well. So I'm just going to have a very brief quotation.
Sure.
It is one of my favorite poems from John Keats. He was a teenager, and he was with a friend, and the friend brought out a copy of the translation of Homer by George Chapman. And they worked on it all night. And he was so excited about it. He walked home, couldn't sleep, and he wrote this sonnet. And I'm just going to read a part of it. Starts with, much have I traveled through the realms of gold. And then till I found Chapman speaking out loud and bold. Then felt I like some watcher of the skies when a new planet swims into his ken. Or like stout Cortez, who with eagle eyes stared at the Pacific. I just wanted to compare that the excitement of discovering a new work of literature can be just as wonderful as discovering a comet, as Keats put so wisely there. Thank you. Thanks, Marty.
Thank you, David. Very, very good. Well, so getting back to what we had read, why is it important to honor your father and mother? Or, as it's also been stated in Deuteronomy, mother and father. Why is it important to remember your parents or people who played those roles? Yes, Michael.
Well,
I think that it's also honoring God in a way when you do that.
Very important. In what way? In what way? It's a very important statement that you made, because this is one take on it. Yes. Yes, David.
Well, to me, it reads, it's a very simple commandment. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long on the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. He's really stating the obvious, but in a very simple, elegant way. Your parents had the sense to bring you into the world. They're trying to teach you to do, most parents try to teach you to do good things and to make a contribution to society. and you're supposed to love them, but you're also supposed to honor them, which means that you think about what they say. And if they say, I need to talk with you, or would you remember this? You pay attention to them. And, but I think it's self-evident that this is a natural thing to do. I mean, one of the commandments that I never had problem doing is honor thy father and thy mother. I adored my dad and my mom, and I miss them both so much right now.
Yes, I think many of us would say that. Yes, Don. Well, Don, let Gail go first.
Yeah, she beat me.
Okay, go ahead, Gail.
Such a gentleman. Yeah, this is from Friedman, and it's the placement of the commandment itself.
Mm-hmm.
This pivotal importance of the commandment to honor one's parents may account for its position in the order of the commandments. The first 4 commandments concern the relationship between humans and God. The last 5 concern the relationship between humans and other humans. And the commandment that comes between and connects these 2 groups is honor your father and your mother.
Yes.
So the positioning of the commandments is as important as sometimes as what they say.
Because one of the duty, as you mentioned, Gail, one of the duties of a parent is to incorporate all of these teachings into the raising of the children, so that they understand the differences between right and wrong in the society within which they're going to grow up. So yes, that is stated in multiple texts. Yes. Don, and then Rabbi Mary.
Thank you, Marty. That particular commandment brings up 2 questions I've had for a long time. First regards what it means to honor one's mother and father, because does that mean to honor them in one's heart, or to honor them by an external show to the community in some way? Of course, it's too short a commandment to make that distinction, but it's something I had, a question I had. And the other question, which may be more important, is that that commandment seems completely self-contained in regard to what it demands and what the consequences are for disobedience. So if you honor your mother and father, you're going to live long. And then the implication is, if you don't honor your mother and father, your life is going to be short. And so that second part extends for me to all the commandments. Like, what are the consequences for disobedience? I just happen to be, excuse me if this question goes on for a little bit.
It's okay.
I just happen to be rereading an old book by a psychologist who explains how people get compliance over us. Now, why salesmen sell us things? Why we end up.
Don, can you repeat that? Your microphone is so difficult, at least for me, to understand what you're saying.
Just lean in some
Can you
more.
talk the last sentence that you said?
Yeah, I didn't. Is that better?
A little better, yes.
Okay, I didn't realize my microphone was bad. I will check that out. So this psychologist, he sold zillions of copies of this book. I think every sales department in the world uses it. How we end up buying things from people. And he says the number one way that salespeople get compliance is by giving away something to start with. The free sample, anything that gives us a sense of obligation. So thinking about that, I referred that back to the commandments, and God says, I gave you freedom from Egypt, and therefore you owe me obedience to my commandments. He starts right off saying that.
Mhm.
And in this case, he says, honor your mother and father, and I'll extend your life. That's the bargain. So in Judaism, there's not really the concept of an afterlife. So all rewards take place in this life. And the biggest reward is that we get to live a little bit longer. You know, if we obey the commandments, we get to live longer. Other religions go much farther. Christianity says, you know, you get eternal life, which is a pretty good deal. I mean, and likewise in Islam, you know, you go to heaven, you get eternal. But in Judaism, we don't have that. We have obey the commandments because I brought you out of Egypt. I gave you that, God says. And your life on earth will be better than it would be otherwise. I mean, I think I'm dragging this on,
Okay.
but I just wanted to point out that for that particular commandment is the prime example for me. Honor your mother and father, and you will live longer.
Because if you're, think about the word honor and what you do with your life as a result of honor. It's part of many oaths of service. It's part of the religion. And think about that, because then you start to understand everything, your question and the answer to it. Okay? It does, everybody always thinks in terms of physical, but could it also mean you will have a long and good life? As a, it doesn't say good. It doesn't say and good. But in the words of Commander Spock, live long and prosper. Think about that. Okay, now I know Rabbi Mary raised her hand, Michael raised his hand, and David. Okay, so Rabbi Mary first.
Okay, I have several things to say, but I'm going to wait until everyone says. The only thing that I want to throw into the discussion is, Gail, do you remember what Rita used to say about her parents? She used to say, my father was a son of a bee.
Okay, I was going to bring that up after we discussed all the positives, you know, but because that's a very important thing.
Yeah, bear in mind if all the parents deserve what we are saying.
That's right.
And I'll talk about the words in a little bit. Please go ahead.
Because there are other, that's very important, and I'll let you do that, because there are other words that can be used, because the word honor has many, many different connotations. Okay. And Michael, go ahead.
Okay. At the beginning, when I said what I said, he asked, well, why is that important? And there's two things. It's important to do that because God told us to. God had told us to, and we do it. The second thing is about honoring your parents is because they are teachers. They are teaching us. And when, as Don said, you honor your parents, you live longer. The purpose of that, as I could see it, is the longer you live, the more you can teach. I think it has a lot to do with teaching, passing on good things that you have learned, and you need life in order to continue to do that. And so that's one part of that. I talked about this last week, and I did mention that the 10 Commandments is not cut and dry. There is a lot of discussion in each one of them. In each commandment, there's a tremendous amount of discussion and knowledge, and it It's really never ending. You get just so much out of it.
Good point. Good point. David, and
Yes.
then Helene.
My point is that there is a very important corollary to that commandment, honor thy father and thy mother. And the corollary is no mother or father should ever have to bury a child. I learned that one kind of an easy way. After I returned from the ASWOM in Denver, I was sent home a little early because I had suffered a very massive depression there. And the doctors decided I'd probably best be home. When I got home a few days later, I sat down with Dad and he said, "Do you want to know about depression?" And he told me about when my brother Donald, my older brother Donald, passed away at the age of 9 months from a heart defect. And he said, I was trying to be a big shot. I was trying to go to work and working, and I'd go into my office and sit and look at the walls. And finally, my boss, who's now my partner, came in and said, "Get out of here. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be with your wife, and we'll come and visit." And that's what he did. And he said, no matter what, the message was that no matter what depression you may be having, imagine the depression I had when I lost a son. And I've never forgotten that. And I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very important contribution to this discussion. Helene, you had your hand up.
What does one do when the parents are bad? What does one do? Do they honor being abandoned? Do they honor be beaten? Do they honor? It's not so clear. We have to look at the entire spectrum of what's possible. And what you just said, David, touched my heart because you said it beautifully. Thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate what you said, because feelings is what we're dealing with, not thinking, but feelings. And when you lose someone, when a child loses a pet, if you're not there with feelings for that child and knowing how to talk to that child's going to grow up with a tight chest all his life. He needs the love and feelings from someone who believes that he is important.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Before I recognize Dawn, I just wanted to say something. You brought this subject up. But you opened a door. And it's, I think, a very important thing. My father was abused as a child. He was both physically and emotionally. And he made a 180-degree turn in the way he conducted his life. He learned from his parents what he did not want to be. So he still learned something, and he taught that to his children. So even a negative experience can be it, but you have to have the mindset, because if you let hatred dominate, everything falls apart. This is part of the discussion. This is very important, because if he had carried that on, I would have been a totally different person. So he made a 180-degree turn in his life. And for that, I not only honor him, but I respect him. It doesn't use the word respect in this discussion, but that's why I brought it in. Okay? So yes, Don, and then Rabbi Mary.
Well, thank you, Marty, and thank you, Helene and David, for sharing that. And I would like to share something about my father, he was absent when I was a kid. You know, he never did anything with me, hardly ever saw him. And what disappointed me most is that when I played football in high school, he never came to a game. And then many years later, he needed help. My mother had died. Sister won't go into that. And my father was very sick. So I had to make a decision about what to do. He died. But I decided to step in and become his caregiver. I don't know what drove me, maybe that commandment. I don't know. But it was one of the most rewarding, and I was his caregiver for 7 years. It was one of the most rewarding experiences because I learned what he had been through and what made him what he was. And even midway through that, he would say to me, "What good are you to me?" His favorite expression. So I used to grit my teeth, going. But he, 7 years later, despite being a brittle diabetic, died at age 96 peacefully. And that was my reward that I got on that fight. So you never know what you're going to reap
Right.
from obeying the commandments. You never know.
That's right. It will change a person because your actions also reconciled all of the questions and hurt that you went through. Your actions, you solved your own problem. If you think about it, as an outsider looking in, you took the bull by the horns. You did the right and proper thing. Okay. And as a result, it made you who you are today.
Well,
Think about it. Think about it.
I won't take that one very much.
Okay. Okay. Rabbi Mary, Grace had her hand up. Do you want to speak after Grace speaks? Okay. Thank you. Grace, go ahead.
Thank you. Great discussion, all of you. I appreciate it. And I was thinking respect right from the get-go. I Googled it, and it's telling me that this was the first commandment that offers promise. Is that true? Yes?
Yes,
That's true, yes?
Yes.
yes.
And here's a statement that I've heard many times is every person is my teacher. Some will teach me what to do, and some will teach me what not to do. You know, and it's like you said, it's the mindset, but it's also part of your emotion and your heart, where your heart lay. You know, I just spent a week with my mother, and it was tragic, endearing, and fun, and eventful and uneventful. And you know, I don't think she's going to be around much longer. She's ready. You know, she's ready, and I'm not ready.
Oh,
She wasn't there for me when I was growing up as much as, you know, she was for my brother and sister because she was a stay-at-home mom. I had a mother that went to work, right? So there's a bit of a difference there in upbringing. My dad was my primary caregiver, and he did differently for me than he had done for my brother and sister. So it created a dynamic that was sometimes uncomfortable, and sometimes, you know, I was always the one that would introduce comedy into the stressful times, because people would be going at it, you know, families argue, and you did this and I don't like that, and I would just, you know, find something hysterical and introduce it to them, and all this chaos would just kind of poof, just peter out. And you know, it would just kind of go away, go away. My mom and dad would be like, where did you ever come up with that? And I don't know, just off the top of my head. So I've always felt like I was the peacemaker in the clan, and it made things easier for me. But honor means a lot of different things, and respect is first and foremost for me. I was taught to be respectful of my elders. And everything was yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. Anybody that was 10 years or older than me, it was yes, ma'am, no, sir. And I started using that with children that I worked with. I would touch them on the shoulder and say, excuse me, sir. And the rest of the kids in the classroom would be like, did she just call you sir? And they loved it. They felt respected. So that's how I was brought up, and that's how I like to share with them. And I'm really looking forward to reading that book. So thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Rabbi Mary, you have the floor.
Okay. I'm not going to go into my personal life except for telling you that my kids still complain about me nonstop. Oh, you didn't buy me those shoes, and I was this, and I was that. And in my mind, at one point, I said, take responsibility of your own life. Stop blaming someone for what you do or who you are. But the point that I want to bring from the Torah is regarding the words. And you remind Michael that we were talking about the issue of respect versus love. You are not required to love your parents. You are required to, and the word honor is a very difficult in Hebrew. The word is kaved, which is respect. At the same time, if you recall, maybe not, that God made the heart of Pharaoh kaved. He made it heavy. So here you will have a word that it is respect, and it says also heavy. So it's, and heavy, you can call it's hard work, or it's a burden, or is, of force, because in Pharaoh's case, it goes from strength to heavy. So kaved is, Michael, what you were talking about, respect. It's something we can see the actions. What I want to bring up for all of you is the difference of the world that we live now and the world that existed hundreds of years ago. Hundreds of years ago, it was a given that you live with your parents, or that your parents are going to live with you and your uncles and your aunt, and that was. And people respected the elders. I think that all of us are in certain age that feel that no one's give about us. We don't count because we are old. So there is no respect for the issue of age. At the same time, these days, I have 3 kids, one in Wisconsin, one in Seattle, and one in Los Angeles. So it's a different life. So how they are going to respect me, if they do, sometimes they do, versus my mom is living with me. I'm going to feed her. I'm going to listen to what she has to say. In India, she's going to give the name to my child. I'm not going to do that. I mean, there are all kinds of traditions that the parents are supposed to do, and we have to look at it also time-wise. Okay, so remember, that's the word kaved. Kavod is to respect, but it's also to honor. And Marty, you mentioned it's not a physical honoring also. If you say, I'm going to be in your place to help you out on Sunday morning, I have to honor my word and do it. So the word honor and respect, as Michael told us last time, has actions connected with them. I might love someone, but you won't know. You won't know. So that was my spiel.
Very good. Thank you, Rabbi Mary. I appreciate that. A very, very good summary of what's been alluded to in everyone's discussion. Don, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, Rabbi Mary, if you wouldn't mind continuing with the Hebrew translation, because I'm wondering, does honor in the Hebrew mean to bring honor to the parents, in which case that would be through one's own behavior, or to directly honor between me and my parents? In other words, the transitive type action.
Well, it's a difficult question. I think that the word to as a verb, to honor, and in Hebrew it's in what we call tzivui, in imperative, as a commandment. Just do it, you know. I said, well, if you wish, you do. No, you just do it. So, and both words in the translation will be honor and respect. If you want to attach to it love, which I always said, you know, and when we say the Shema, and it says, and you shall love, ve'ahavta, it's different than ehov. It's not as a command there in the language, in the grammar. Here is a command, like it says, shamor the Shabbat. Kaved, honor or respect your parents. And I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but
Not quite.
it's an active verb.
Okay, well, let me give an example. If every weekend I go to my parents' house and I honor them and bring them gifts, but then in between that I go out and rob a bank and I get some newspapers. So it's my behavior brings dishonor to my parents because of what I'm doing, and yet I'm on the surface, I'm honoring them. So does the Hebrew make that distinction, or is just something you got to figure out?
Well, that's why I said the issue, you have to figure out what does it mean. Because if you are what they call Marti Shanda, you know, you were involved in dirty business. And I'll tell you, when dirty business appear on the newspaper, I don't know what you do, but I'm saying, is he Jewish? You know, is he family? That's not honoring, because it's, you just, by you being dirty, you project that to the parents, and the parents assume responsibility, or their shame, or a guilt. You know, the issue of guilt that will come, you know, he's behaving like that just because of me. I didn't give him butter, I gave him margarine, and that's what made him rob the bank. You know, some, so as I said, today it will look different than those days. You know, so you'll come and do the presents, or you have supposed to feed them until they die. You were supposed to give them housing and this and that, and drive them and whatever it is. And it's a good point, Don, because I think that you are the one determining the criteria of what it will be honoring. Because in your example, your parents might say, oh, well, I need these gifts like in my cup. I don't want those gifts. I want him not to appear in the newspaper as a corrupt someone. So the criteria of them being honored, being respected, and your criteria how to respect is might be different. And they say the same thing about spouses. You know, there is a spouse that wants you to do A, But for you to love your spouse is to do B, but B doesn't have any meaning to them. You know, if you bring them flower, the first thing is, well, he's having an affair. No, I'm just kidding. If you bring flowers and it doesn't mean anything to the other. So it's a very good point that you're making. I didn't think about it, because by saying respect or honor, who determines what does that mean? How does it look like? Grace said, if I call people yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, or no, sir, and no, ma'am, usually it's not a no, I respect them. That's her criteria.
Okay,
Thank you, thank you. I'm thinking
Thank
of
you.
Bernie Madoff, of course.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Marty?
Cohen.
I know,
who's
Michael,
sitting
you've had
there.
your hand up for a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Listening to Mary, Rabbi Mary, I would say this, that it's the way I understand it. It's God used the word, as far as I could see, God used the word honor when it came to your parents, and I would say this, that the word, in this case, the word honor encompasses respect and love. It would encompass those two words, because he used the word honor, not respect, as far as I can see, or love. So it would include those two words of love and respect.
Very good, Michael. Thank you. Gail, you're on.
There's the other side of the coin too. Some parents demand honor and respect. Some assume that they're going to get it, and some never mention it or bring it up. So you also have that dichotomy going too between the parent and the child. And the other thing is, then you can get into things like sibling rivalry. So one child is just, the perfect child, at least in the parent's eyes, and the other one is the outlier. But it's a very complicated thing, this thing about honor. But I think parents are the ones who can kind of set the frame for it, and can either demand it or expect it, or there's different ways.
Sure.
And that's can be very complicated sometimes.
Good point. Rabbi Plout mentions that in Leviticus, the command is to revere or fear your parents.
I don't remember the word, but I don't think it's fear. But let me say, you say Leviticus what?
Leviticus 19, verse 3.
Why don't you read to me in the Hebrew?
Wise guy. He doesn't go into that. Anyway, he just brings up these other two words. So revere, I always think of it as a form of love, reverence, awe with your parents. Okay. But fear is, now think for a minute about the concept of God. Are the parents being a substitute? Stand in awe of your parents, like you should stand in awe before your God? Should you? I don't equate the two, but is God elevating your parents to a higher level in this particular commandment? You can say, well, I don't want to take them for granted, but should you fear them? Yes, Dawn.
There were times.
There are times, yeah, you know. Don, you were going to say.
Well, fear is usually associated with threat. When you realize what the other person can do to you. And so in the case of God, the Hebrews
Yeah, that's
were
big
quite
time.
aware of what can happen if you disobey. But and likewise with parents. I mean, you're so vulnerable when you're tiny that depending on how you grew up, you might have good reason to fear. But then there's the question of what is it, the Stockholm effect, when there's a close association with fear and love, and the two get easily confused. So it's such a complex emotional. Once you go there, it's very complex. And thinking back to what David said about a parent losing a child, that can be devastating, but anyone who's been in the military knows that you see thousands of children being lost before their time, and how many parents had to endure that because they were, you know, their kids were forced to fight. So I just think it's really complicated.
It is. There's no easy answer. Yes, Grace.
Thank you. The commentary in my Torah, I'd like to read it.
Please.
The fifth commandment, honoring one's parents, is a counterpart to the honor due God. It forms a bridge between duties toward God and toward humans. I think as parents, when we look to our parents, as children, we have an expectation of a role model. You know, they're setting the pace. They're setting the precedence for being a role model, as we should be as humans. So, and that can be taken to either extreme, right? I mean,
sure.
There's just, like it has been said, there's not just one short answer to this. And I like the explanation of Ed, you know, because it encompasses a lot deeper meaning of honor. It says more, but that was the key ingredient for myself.
Very good point. In Leviticus.
Marty,
yes.
Marty, excuse me. What's the chapter in Deuteronomy? I keep looking.
It's not. It's in Leviticus. Leviticus.
No wonder.
3. I'll read it. Read it. You shall revere his mother and father and keep my Sabbaths. It's all tied together, as Grace was talking about. I, the Lord, am your God. Okay, it's sort of, if you want a text that supports what Grace has mentioned about bridging. God is like a parent, and if your parents respected God and looked at God as a parent, by looking at your parents with respect, and indirectly you're respecting God. Any further comments? A lot of bathroom breaks.
If we say that that's respect to God, we can go ahead and say, you know, all the mitzvot, all the commandments here are for God. I mean, you know, if you are a murderer, that's against God. If you are a, you know, this or that, it's against God. We can separate the mitzvot and say, and you shall love your God, blah, blah. And then we can say, you shall not murder your fellow and you shall not rob him. But basically, that's what we're going to say. You know, this is a very difficult one. And actually, I was thinking, I don't want to get into too much politics, but I was thinking about, I was doing listen to the inquiry about January 6th, and I was thinking about the issue of loving and respecting. Even if the people wanted to say something to the president and they thought that it was important, even if they did not like him, love him, or whatever, they had to respect him. They couldn't go into the room and hold their collar and say, do this and this and this. They had to knock on the door. They had to come very quietly.
It's
so
the
there is an
office.
issue. Yeah. So there is an issue of what's there. And regarding parents, for me, it's a very, very complicated issue. It is complicated because some of the kids are going to be nice to the parents because they want to get the money when they die. You can say that, you know. So it's not for the respect and the love, but for a reason. Or they want to live longer, or maybe that's what it means to live longer, to live in a better place. I want their home. I mean, or there are parents, as you said, that say, if you don't listen to me, you're not going to get anything. So you better listen to me and better do what I'm telling you. So then you are frightened. I cannot do what I want. I have to do what they want. So the relationships are very complicated.
So it's very human.
Exactly. It's not black and white. Exactly.
And I think in a way, I think that the way things have been written here are ingenious because they are not specific. If it was very specific, we would say, oh, well, then I can do this or I can do that. But as you speak with other people, they have different interpretations of these words, different understandings. That's the beauty of not delineating everything. Once you do, you're going to leave something out. And that's, that's the way our Constitution was set up too, for that very reason, to leave certain things nebulous, recognizing that in future generations, things may be different. Yes, Michael.
God created you and your parents delivered you. And that's the connection, the three. God says, honor thy mother and father. So I see it as a three-way connection between parents and God.
By the way, Michael, there is a midrash that says exactly that it's a triumvirate.
Rabbi Michael.
But it says that it is God, Father, and Mother. That's where you come from. So you're very profound in that.
It sounds like the Trinity.
Yes.
Oh, I caution you.
No, I understand, but it's a very important concept that we're coming up with. Yes, Don.
Yeah, at the beginning of chapter 20, we know that God spoke these commandments. So there's a limit to how detailed they could get anyway, because this was not being recorded in any way except through the ears. So maybe later on, it takes, had to learn how to write first before start to elaborate.
Well, anyway, any other discussion on this? I mean, we've really covered the waterfront, and it's an important commandment, and we've mentioned all of the necessary discussions about the bridges between respect for God, the parents, and all of the other things. And now come a few more commandments that are going to, this is the moral code. This is still part of this moral code, where it's all coming from, where your moral code comes from. So this is Michael's favorite, verse 13. Okay. David, would you like to, if not, I can have someone else. It's up to you.
If it's the one that I think it is, it's just 4 words. Thou shalt not kill.
That is in the St. James version. Okay. That is pointed out, but in the Torah, it says, thou shalt not murder.
Yeah, thou shalt not murder.
That's right. And Michael is very strong on this, but all in the same verse. Okay. You shalt not commit adultery. You shalt not steal. You shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. Which begs one simple question. Why are they all lumped together?
Well, they're lumped together, but they're separate commandments. I see them as separate individual.
Oh, yes, traditionally they are. They are. But
Yeah.
they're all lumped together in one verse.
What do you mean? No, it's not one. It's what you're talking about is what Don, I think, was mentioning about the oral Torah and what's written. We don't know how it was said. It probably would say tatam, tatam, tatam. The person that wrote the verses that didn't exist and you won't find them in the scroll has everything running. But you're right about the language. The language is very similar to all those things.
Yes. So why would somebody put them all together like that?
Because those are the commandments that deal with how we deal with our fellow humans. What is the basic level of decency that we have to follow?
Okay.
We're not allowed to murder. We're not allowed to steal. We're not allowed to dishonor another person, especially our wives or husbands. And we're not allowed to bear false witness. These are the basic tenets of being a fairly decent person.
Okay. Gail, you had your hand up first.
Well, this gets back to what I said an hour ago, the positioning of the commandments. I mean, that's what I said. The first 4 have to do with God, and the last, you have the positioning of the honor of mother and father in the middle, and then you have the 4 that have to do with relationships with your fellow human beings. That's why they're together. I mean, it's pretty simple. There's a rationale between the order that they are given.
Okay, and that is, we'll get to you, Michael.
Well, you go from God to humans, and the order.
Okay, why did they list you shall be murder? You shall not murder first.
Well, I don't know that there's significance between one or the other, except probably murder is the most heinous of all the things. And it's a finality with murder. You can't fix any of the, you could fix some of the other commandments if you broke them, but murder, you're kind of a done deal. So
Okay, yes, Michael.
I see it as stealing would be the most powerful commandment. And the reason I say that is because if you commit murder, you have stolen someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep someone in slavery, you have stolen someone's freedom, and so on and so forth. And so that's how I see the word steal. Of course, thou shalt not murder is extremely powerful, and that's why I think it's stated number one. But personally, just on a personal note, I see stealing as just as powerful, if not more, because the connotations built into that, and that's what I want to say.
So biblically, thou shalt not commit adultery was having relations with another married woman. Later on, it included having a married man not having relations with even an unmarried woman. This does not address the unmarried woman. Later on in history, it comes to bear. It's a reinterpretation.
Well, it's a given, Marty. It's a given. And the given is you shall not commit adultery with the woman of another man because she is his property. When he commits adultery or has sex relationship with a single woman, maybe the father of the woman is upset, but and by having sex with her, he buys her. That's one of the ways of buying a woman, is by having sex with her. But let me go again for the language, guys. There is a difference, even in English. In English, we don't have the verb command. We have it in Spanish, in French, we don't. If you know Spanish, I would say, levántate, that's a command. Or no te levantes is much smoother. So here it says, honor, respect your parents, and then it goes and said, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you see the difference? And it's a very interesting way of saying, this sounds like a direct commandment in Hebrew, tzivui, and this is more the future. You shall not do that. I never paid attention to that, and I find it now quite fascinating, the difference.
So this opens up a real interesting discussion. Michael was saying before that when you murder someone, you're stealing their life. If you're committing adultery, you're stealing the wife. Okay, and what about false witness? You're in court and you lie about the events that took place. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're stealing someone else's reputation. You're stealing the truth. It's another way of putting it. So there are so many different ways of looking at this. And
Gail.
I'm sorry. Yes, Mary. Yes.
Gail had her hand up.
oh, I was just going
Oh,
to
I'm sorry. Yes, Gail.
I was going to say that to me, lying or bearing false witness is probably one of the most devastating things you can do to someone, because you can't put it back in the box. Once it's out there, it never goes away.
So what we're doing, that's a very important comment.
Yeah, you cannot undo it. You can't undo it. If you steal an item from somebody, you can replace it. but a reputation,
That's right. It is a form of murder. And so you start seeing some of these variations in thinking, but they're all different forms of the same thing. And that's why each of us, because of certain situations going on, we'll emphasize one more than the other, but they all overlap in many ways. What other ways do they overlap? I mentioned some of them. You have, and you guys have mentioned some of them. What other ways come to mind? I mean, Kant devotes an entire book to the categorical imperative. Thou shalt not lie. Okay, we've brought that into the discussion many times. I know personally, my daughter, that is her. She thinks lying is the worst thing somebody can do. And so different people emphasize, Michael emphasizes murder, but they're all in a way, they're all together. What else? What are other ways that we can do or say that can wind up backfiring in the future? Let's put it that way. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, the word lie is pretty terrible. They all are. However, some of the commandments, like lie, you must not lie, that could be that there could be, and they probably are, good reasons why you should lie when it comes to saving somebody's life or somebody's well-being. And I could give examples of that.
But that actually comes up in the discussion about the categorical imperative.
But
what happens, and that is a distinct question posed by Kant himself.
however, this is very cut and dry. And if you are going to have a discussion between the word murder and kill, I would certainly like to talk about that, because there's no gray area there between murder and kill. That's very, very clear, as clear as any of the commandments, and that may be why it's number one, because it's so clear and so definite. And maybe I can talk about that when you're ready.
Okay. Let's give us a chance to go into some of the other repercussions before we come back to that.
Yeah, I said
think
when
in
you're
the
ready.
meantime, I'm going to have to say goodbye.
Okay,
So I will
give
try to
our
be-
regards, our best to Wendy, and
Thank
hope
you.
she's doing okay.
Thanks
Thank
a
you,
lot.
Debbie.
Thank you. We'll hopefully try to see you next week.
Okay, David,
Thank
Bye.
you.
thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
When we say do not bear false witness, most people would say this is not necessarily lying. This is in court. You do not want to bear false witness. Why, for many years, have they used in courts swearing on the Bible? I will tell nothing but, you swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. It's to remind you of this admonition, you shall not bear false witness. This is where I wish Michael Mussman was with us today, because he would understand this concept. And for many, this was spoken about, oh, this is just in court. This is just in court. It is in cases where it's one person's word against the other and it has to be settled. whether it's by Moses or judges or things like of that nature.
It's also said, you're sworn to tell the truth. You're under oath. You're sworn
Yes.
to tell the truth.
Yes. On your honor, you are going to tell the truth and only the truth. Yes, Gail.
Well,
I'm sure you found commentary.
the Torah doesn't say that oaths are required.
No, but it has been interpreted as
Oh, that's fine, but we're talking about the Torah. We're not talking about.
However, this dovetails into what we'll read later as we go into other parts of Torah. Yes, please, Suzanne.
Yeah, I don't think this just means court. I'm not exactly sure they had
Okay.
back in those days. But bearing false witness against one's neighbor, I mean, that could be anything. I mean, what if I didn't like my next door neighbor and I told the neighbor across the street that my next door neighbor was stealing stuff out of our garage? I mean, we don't have a garage, but I mean, I'm just making a hypothetical here. Well, that would be bearing false witness against my neighbor.
Okay.
And that would be damaging that person's reputation because the neighbor would not have had any idea that I was saying that. And then the person that lives across the street may then decide not to be friends with the neighbor because of what I said, and might spread that throughout the neighborhood.
That's right.
So I don't think it means, I mean, it can mean court for sure. But when it was first written, I don't think there was court back in those days. So I think the idea was not to tell lies, spread rumors, gossip, anything that would be harmful or hurtful to one's neighbors or friends or acquaintances.
But think about it, Suzanne, that it's not just the name. If someone bears false witness, you can put this person to jail, to prison, to death.
Yes.
Oh,
So
sure.
it's beyond just, the name. I think that Friedman does a very interesting comment here, that at those days there was not an oath, because it wouldn't have been necessary, since in the first commandment, it says you should not say the name of God in vain. So he suspects that there was no oath at that time to take, to lie or to take the name of God in vain, to repeat that as a command.
So basically, what you're saying, Rabbi Mary, is that this also relates to the commandment of not taking God's name in vain.
That's, with the oath. Yeah.
There's another bridge, Grace. Okay. So the first series of commandments, as Grace pointed out, is between God and man.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these relate God and community. How can you behave in a decent way to preserve a community? Because the community breaks apart if any of these things don't work. What do you think about that? Okay, great.
I like it.
No, but these are the bridges, and Grace used that word correctly. That it's very important to think about these, and Rabbi Miri is just talking about that. So it's very important to to see how these interconnect, because this is not just commandments from God, commandments from parents. It's commandments to you, and what is proper behavior in the community. All are now related one to the other. And if you think of the commandments that way, it makes them even more significant, more important, because that's going to be the guide to everything else that follows. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
Well, one thing that we have to remember is that laws like these, commandments, were established because these things were done. If there was no murder in the world, you shouldn't say you shall not murder. But it was to establish things that should not continue being done.
Right.
You don't put a traffic light unless in this cross there were a lot of accidents and we need to make some kind of order there. So when I give a law, it's because these things were done. And listen to all the laws and commandments of our Congress, Senate, Supreme Court, and so forth. It was to stop something. And that something is something that's going on.
Okay. Yes, Don.
I have to keep remembering that these commandments apply only to the Hebrews gathered at the foot of Mount Sinai. They do not apply to all the other myriads of tribes outside. It's only to the Hebrew. So I'm wondering that these million people who just came out of an environment where they were just slaves, I mean, did they have an opportunity ever to engage in these things? Was there, when they were in Egypt as slaves, was there theft and murder and adultery all going on within the Hebrew tribe? I find it hard to imagine that in such a short time that these commandments could be relevant at all. So.
Well, first of all, these commandments were not invented by us. They were, many of them, except for the Shabbat, they were in other cultures at the same time, if you want to go historically, okay? And the other thing, let me ask you, do you think in 200 years, no more, or 250 or whatever, that our Constitution applied to everyone in the world? Or just to our tribe?
Well,
United States Constitution?
What?
You mean the United States Constitution?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, of course, it defined the United States government, yeah.
But it's just for us. The French don't have to go by it.
No, that wasn't my question, Rabbi Mary. My question was, how did all these commandments become necessary so soon after a people came out of slavery? I mean, they had no opportunity to.
Yes, they did, in an indirect way.
Okay.
And I'll get to that. First, Grace, and I think Suzanne is thinking of saying something too.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know, but
Grace,
first.
I'm sorry I skipped over you for a second.
No, it's all right. So my thought, and is when we talk about a bridge. We are the bridge. The Jew are the bridge. We're the supporters of human kindness, of decency. These were given to us for a reason, and to carry out and to be the example for all nations, right? Now, So the French don't have this, or some other religious sect doesn't follow it the way that we do. But I think God is expecting us to be the example of how human should relate, identify, care for, respect everyone, because that's why these are so interconnected. As you say, they're so and what is a bridge? A bridge is a support, right? It's a support to get from point A to point B. And it's not just about, I know about slavery, okay? My father's great grandparents, had slaves, but they were treated like family. And, they had been, purchased and given a home and taken care of, and burial rights, and given education, and they were treated like family. My dad had, friends and people that he grew up with that worked, and they became, sharecroppers. They're farmland. And so they weren't necessarily mistreated, but I think Don's point was they didn't know any different. They didn't know any different. And God's saying, I'm going to take care of you. Look what I've already done. And I see a whole lot here, And the issue is that I feel like the Jewish culture is so much more forgiving and understanding than any other culture I've ever been around and dealt with. And I lived on military bases 26 years of my life. 26 years. Before I was 17, we moved 39 times, relocated, retransplanted. And I was exposed to many ethnic families and groups, and I think that's a blessing. I think it's a blessing for a Jewish community to show an example. Because when I went to my Jewish friend's home, we did something different around Sabbath and Shabbat. And in my home, my mother was this person that celebrated everything. One night we're having, the Sabbath dinner or Passover, and the next week we're having the Easter bunny show up. So I got exposed to all of that and anything in between. And I think that was a splendid way of, realizing that, we want to intermingle appropriately and treat one another with respect. And this is God's covenant with us.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Suzanne, I apologize. I stepped out and
No,
I
that's
forgot. I
okay.
apologize.
That's okay. I guess in response to Don's questions or comments, for other people, and I'm going to put myself in that category as other. Back after Yeshua was crucified and resurrected, I guess it was around Pentecost, there was arguments whether or not Gentiles had to convert to Judaism in order to accept Yeshua. And the end result of that was no, and that the only thing that the Gentiles had to agree to was to follow the Noahide laws, which is kind of surprising. I would have thought they would have said, the 10 Commandments, but they settled on the Noahide laws and something about the blood or not eating live animals. So I guess like eating an oyster, would be considered live, I suppose. That was pretty much it. Marty, you're disagreeing, or, I mean, that's
Well,
Book of Acts.
well, there are other commandments that are going to come along. If
Oh,
that's what
yes,
you're referring to.
yeah, but in terms of Judaism, well, I don't even know if you could call the Noahide laws Judaism, but that was what was decided back then, in addition to what commandments Yeshua had given. So
Okay.
I know, but there was something else I wanted to say. Now I can't remember what it was.
Okay, it'll come back, and then you just raise your hand. I just wanted to comment about a few things. When we still have several things to go over, but the commandments that we're discussing are actions dealing with the spoken word, and as was mentioned, how it can influence the actions of others, but also physical activity. And when we do things with our hands and the like, we make it with our hands, but we can also make something happen with words. Think about Breshit, okay? So so words and actions are sort of linked. And so if we speak something, speak falsely or things, as was brought out, it's going, as Suzanne mentioned before, it's going to change the way people would look at someone else. Gossip comes to mind. Okay, nobody has brought this into the discussion yet.
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
okay,
I apologize. It may have been at a time when I was coughing.
It's okay. Spring Valley.
but it's a very important concept. It's a very important concept that we don't think of gossip as something, oh, hey, did you know what somebody else did, or things like, no, that changes the way another person will think and may actually take action. One of the issues, if we fast forward it to today, at one time, Flip Wilson made it famous to say, well, the devil made me do it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's an excuse. Today, we can say, well, I saw it on the news and that made me do this crime. It's so what people say. And so we've got to think before we speak. We all run into this issue, but that's really part of this as well. I certainly don't always think before I speak. And I think if we all think about ourselves, this happens. It's fairly common. But that also dovetails a little bit into this as well. So I think that these are all linked together, because whether we speak it or we do it, we are accomplishing some sort of action, either directly or indirectly. Okay, any other comments about this? Then if we could move on to the last commandment. Okay, it talks about it, and by the way, if you think about this, what was actually written on the tablets? Only 10 words. And I think that maybe over time, it is all of these had to be explained so many times. What does this mean? If you say low, covered, okay, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. You know, you shouldn't bear false witness and everything. But it didn't go into that whole commentary. It was just one word. So I'm going to ask you, since we don't have those original tablets, what do you think they could have meant? Or what did they say? What were the words printed on the tablets? Because this type of discussion does not fit on 2 tablets. Any
Help,
idea?
Mary.
Okay, Gail, go ahead.
No, I'm saying help, Mary.
Oh, okay. No, the thought has to come to mind. These are just 10 words that are being printed. Some people say it was just 10 letters. Don, and then Suzanne.
Yeah.
So without reaching ahead, didn't Moses smash the first set of tablets with the words on it? So we only have version 2.
We have a Xerox copy.
Well, we don't really know what was on the first set.
Good point. Excellent point. But yes, Suzanne, you had your
Well,
hand up.
mine is more of a question. How, because I've never heard this idea. How do we know that there was only like one word per commandment?
It says, this is a quotation out of Plout.
Oh, okay.
Biblical scholars have also wondered whether the 10 words as we have them now are perhaps an enlargement of an original, simpler formulation, which did not know of the retributions and rewards of verses 5 and 6, or the reasons given in verses 7 and 11, or the reward promised in verse 12, or the expansion of verse 14 after the words, your neighbor's house. This is a strong possibility, but it would not affect the antiquity of the basic commandments or prove that the 10 words were post-Mosaic. The person of Moses remains inextricably connected with the theophany and its climactic proclamation. So it really doesn't, he's sort of taking an out here. It doesn't matter. Okay. But but what we've spoken about, all the different implications so far, we have spoken about examples set by others, by our parents and our teachers, a code of behavior that goes back a long way. Okay. And so do they change with time? Well, at least since the time as the final version of Torah was written, no. But before then, as was pointed out, you had oral tradition, you had different interpretations, you had and different ways of saying them. And so we don't know, I think our discussion today has to take that into consideration. So we may walk away with a slightly different take, because just like the game of telephone, we walk away with a slightly different interpretation. But all of these interpretations are based on whether it's one word or a phrase. It doesn't matter. It was very, very important. I'm also going to answer another question that I overheard. Yes, Rabbi Mary, go ahead.
A good exercise for us the 21st century would be, guys, why don't you write 10 things or 10 commandments or 10 something that are the most important things that you want people to do or not to do. And let's see if it's parallel to those 10 things. It would be an interesting way of looking at the world. The other thing is those that say the letters, what came to my mind is how much we use not letters, but numbers. So I'm taking the fifth, or, we should do the 25th. And it was the number 9. So
That's right. No, it's true. These are they're symbols that represent all of the what was said and thought, which brings me to our last commandment. This is Jimmy Carter's favorite. Okay, because that opened a huge debate. Would somebody care to read the 10th commandment? Let me just get to it here. I forget the verse. Is it 16?
14.
14. I've been turning pages because there's so much written about this. So verse 14, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female slave, or his ox, or his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. That couldn't all be said in one word. You shouldn't covet. There's a shorter way of saying, but it goes into, as was discussed, property. And by the way, adultery does create an issue with inheritance, property. Think about that. And that is from the rabbi I live with, Rabbi Sue. So there are certain aspects to this that are very important. But why is verse 14 also here? Yes, Rabbi Mary.
It's interesting. I'm not going to give my view on this. Just the only thing that comes to my mind, and again, I studied Torah year after year, is it would be like something for Gail, something that's a Buddhist kind of thinking, because it's not a doing, it's something inside. It's a spiritual way of living.
Excellent point. Excellent point. What came to my mind was something a lot simpler. Don't do it, don't say it, and don't even think about it. Yes, Don.
I was going to say that the commandments just prior to that are the action ones.
Yes.
Don't commit it. Don't do it. Don't steal. Don't commit adultery. And then you get to that point, as you say, don't even think about it. But that's the hardest one. I mean, because nobody knows whether you're thinking about it or not, except you. So it kind of it's preliminary to actually committing.
But if you think about it, it can influence what you say and what you do.
Yeah, well, in Christianity,
Yeah,
the thinking about it is the doing. It's equivalent.
Yes, that's true.
But how how one stops oneself from a thought. That's the
Well,
age
it's
question.
not just think. It's a training thing, Don,
Yeah.
because that's what we're trying to install in people. Just be happy with what you have. Let's say in another word. You know, your car is fine. You don't need this type. I mean, but how do you train yourself to say, look, I have, and this is true, I have a 22 years Toyota. I could look at a new one and said, oh, I wish I had that. I'm very happy with mine, you know. So I had to say that to myself so many times until I'm happy with what I have.
But that, Rabbi Mary, what you just said is there's like an instantaneous covetous thought, you know, just a microsecond that pops up, and then you train yourself to squash it. But you can't really stop it because the brain is always churning around and bubbling up.
Well, you know, in the Buddhist culture, Gail, help me out on this. There isn't such a thing as wanting what you don't have or just looking at that and I want that. Am I right, Gail?
There's a kind of a cute saying about it. It says, when you observe thoughts, it's fine to observe them, just don't serve them tea. Okay, so the thought will come and go, and you can watch it come and go, but just don't sit down and serve it tea and cake and dinner and everything
Right.
else. Yeah.
Good point.
Don't
Good point.
attach.
By the way, this is a very interesting thing, is since you brought in Buddhism. The 10 Commandments, some people have said, is for everyone all around the world. And indeed, if you look at some of the teachings in Taoism or Taoism, Confucianism, if you look into Hindu, if you look into Buddhism, they may say it in different words, but they don't want you to steal. They want you to respect others. They want they don't want you to murder. They don't want things. Where does the problem come from? And this comes later as an admonishment to it's an admonition from God, if you will.
Marty, what do you mean by problem? I'm not.
Well, it's a distinct problem because there are certain actions that will come along and say from a different authority, okay, it is okay to cheat. It is okay to steal. It is okay to lie. It is okay to covet. Okay? They are in our texts. Think of King David. That's what first comes to mind.
But it's not okay to murder.
Right, right.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
He plots that out very carefully.
Yeah, Uriah, his friend
Yeah.
and general.
And so that's right. So he commits all of these.
But it's not okay to murder. You didn't put that in. It's okay to kill on certain circumstances, but it's not okay
But
to
he
murder.
does plot to murder Uriah.
Yes.
But that's not okay.
Not okay.
Oh.
So we exemplify, King David, this, that, and the other thing. But boy, he violated every one of the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, he was a screw up at times.
That's right.
Well, we don't have any saints.
That's right.
Thank
But
goodness.
we have to recognize that this is the negative teaching.
Right.
we can, we can still honor him because God honors him,
Well,
because he comes back to studying Torah.
okay, think about Genesis and all the families that we studied in Genesis. Talk
Yeah, they
about
all
a
have
bunch
some,
talk about a bunch of screw ups.
Yeah.
And
It's
yet,
very dysfunctional.
and yet we honor Abraham and Sarah and blah blah blah. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because the answer to the question that was posed, what happens if a parent is not a good parent? Okay,
and we had examples of that.
we have tons of examples of that.
Many.
You can still honor them.
You still honor them because they're teaching you what not to do.
Exactly. And that's the example that I brought up before. That's right. And it's so.
I'm not sure about that one. When you have parents that abuse you physically, psychologically, that
Oh,
you are
yes.
wounded for the rest of your life,
But my
yeah, they
my
taught me
dad
not
took
to
it.
do it.
It
But
did
the
affect him
fact of the matter,
tremendously.
Marty, is that if the parents abuse their kids, the tendency of the kids to abuse next time is very high.
Oh, you're very great, very great. But I admire him because he did a 180-degree turn. He was able to do that. And so he learned what not to do. That's right. Yes, Gail and Suzanne. I don't know who had the hand up first, but
there are also there is a time when it's okay to break a commandment too, and that's in order to save a life. You might have to lie in order to save a life. You might have to murder to save a life. You might, so.
Yeah, these are very fine points that I am sure not only rabbis, but lawyers and judges throughout the ages have had to deal with.
You might have to kill to save a life.
Yes.
But you can't use murder there because it's very well defined. You can't murder to save a life. You can kill.
Okay.
And so that's where some people do not understand the difference between murder and kill. When you cannot plan to take someone's life. You cannot make a plan to take someone's life and go through with that plan.
No,
Right.
I disagree.
Well,
I disagree.
There are going to be different interpretations, and Gail, you go ahead. There's another interpretation
without planning to do it. Okay, I'm going to see that somebody's going to burn down somebody's house and burn the family alive. Okay, so I plan and I murder that person before they can commit that act. I mean, that's pretty extreme, but I think that's excusable.
Okay. Now, Suzanne had her hand up politely before all of this. So Suzanne, please say what you want to say, and then I'll call on Dawn and then back to Michael.
Okay, I just wanted to add to your story about your dad. My mother, her father, my grandfather, was abusive to grandmother and all the siblings. And my grandmother, I would call the police and so forth. Well, eventually my grandmother left him with 4 kids, which she raised on her own, and just literally, by doing housekeeping and other odd jobs. And none of them, my mother, my 2 aunts, and my uncle, they all married and had kids, and not one of them was abusive to their kids.
Right.
There
are a lot of people that you are correct. There are a lot of people that walk away from that. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I know there's another door is opening. Michael, go ahead and say what you wanted to say.
Yeah.
Then Grace and Don.
Thank you, Marty. To take Gail's point, if you know someone is going to do something evil, starting a fire, starting a kill, you call the authorities. You have the ability to call the authorities as soon as possible, but you can't take the law into your own hands and do that. There is you just can't do you can't do that, and so that's why there is a difference between to kill and to murder. A murder is a plan.
What Michael says is in sort of in Torah, because it does this murder is the plotting to kill someone
And go through with it.
Forethought. That's
Okay.
right.
And also complete that thought.
Okay, thank you. Wait a minute. Now I forget who had hands up. Grace, I know, and Dawn. Okay, so Grace, why don't you put your 2 cents in?
All right, here's 2 cents I want to share with you. I raised 4 boys, right? They raised me. We raised each other. That's the truth about it. And they had an abusive parent, single mother. She had 9 children. I ended up with 4 of them. And sometimes they're cousins and every other kid in the neighborhood. My house was a place to hang out because it was safe, right? There was understanding. There was something that, they needed and I needed, and it worked out. And I never, ever once bashed their mother because, and I've dealt with other kids professionally that come from abusive parents. Never, ever did I hear a child say, I don't want to ever see my mother again. They never felt that.
Mm-hmm.
And they all want to return because they think they can change it and fix it,
Agree. That is exactly what my father was like too. I agree 100% with what you said. Don, you're on.
Okay. Coming back to the chapter again, God is speaking to the people, and just a couple of verses onward, which God says, here's my commandment, and you're going to sacrifice your livestock to me. And that's, that is our covenant. But then after Job, God never addresses the Hebrew people again, neither through any individual nor directly to everybody. And so now we've got the 10 Commandments, and we have the temple where the sacrifices were made, and then the temple gets destroyed. I'm leaping ahead here purposely, but bear with me. And then another hundreds of years go by, the Babylonians let the Jews build another temple, and then that one gets destroyed by the Romans. But never once does God make an appearance through all of that before the people again. And so it's all left to the rabbis to sort this out. It all stopped. It all stopped 1,500 years ago in terms of what it all means.
Exactly.
So we are struggling even now with this meaning because there is no divine guidance or direct divine guidance that we know of, and such things as the distinction between murder and kill. That's just an argument. I mean, there is no real guidance.
Well, what I was getting after is what you're addressing. God admonishes us at another time in Torah. He says, and I'm going to paraphrase it. I don't advise this, but I know you're going to want a king. be sure the king always has the Torah at his side.
Right.
That's,
right. Well
by the way,
said.
that is what David does with repentance at the end of his life studying Torah. And God forgives him for all the bad deeds. So the Midrash goes.
That's right. It's
So,
right. Say Midrash.
but it's man-made. Because when a king says, my army will now go here and kill and steal and do all the pillaging and everything, bring back all these things that I personally covet. Okay. And that gets passed on to the troops and everything. That's why we have to deprogram our troops when they go into battle. We have to change their school of thought. This is part of PTSD. They still have a problem with this. And so this is far more than things. But if you live what is being said here, if you live a pious life and attribute all of the goodness to God, not yourselves, not a king, not a president, okay, not yourself, but it is from God only, then you will understand and you will lead a life that will honor your parents, honor God, and honor your children. Your children will be part of this process, their children, and the entire community will benefit. Problem is, we screwed it up. Okay. Yes, Suzanne, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I thought somewhere, and I don't remember if I read this in the Old Testament or just somewhere along the way. I thought the kings were supposed to write their own copy of the Torah. Transcribe it for themselves.
I don't know the answer to that question. Rabbi Mary, do you know? I hadn't
I'm not
heard that
understanding
before.
the question. What's the question
Well,
exactly?
it's not a question. I thought that the kings of Israel were supposed to write out their own copy of the Torah.
I don't know.
And I thought I had read that somewhere in scripture, but maybe not.
I don't know.
So I don't know if it's a question. It's just half question, half comment.
Well, Susan, you're talking to a rabbi who doesn't believe in the line of dates in the Torah. So what it says, it says that when the people called Samuel, he was
He was
a prophet,
Yeah.
and he said, well, give us a king. And then, they bugged him so much, he gave them the king. It was Saul. Saul was the first king.
Right.
And then what it was said is, and when you'll have a king, make sure, as Marty said, that the book was probably a scroll or something, is all the time with him, that he does not invent stuff.
Right.
And we know that when kings invent stuff, oy vavoy, that's the worst thing that can happen. Yeah, so I said, adhere to that. But it's not that every king wrote his own book. Let me tell you what, Susan, I don't know. And the kings are not in the Torah. The kings are
Afterward.
After the Torah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Gail has her hand up and may have an answer for you. Gail, you're muted.
Gail!
Sorry. Okay, I Googled. So I'm
Thank
cheating.
you.
The Torah commanded Jewish kings to write their own Torah scroll from a master in the possession of the Levites and to read it every day of their lives so that they should not become haughty and they might keep God's laws.
Oh, okay.
Deuteronomy 17:18 through 20.
Thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
You're
Then I did
welcome.
remember it
Thank you,
correctly.
Google.
Very good,
Okay.
Suzanne. Very good.
Given that many of Israel and Judea's kings were not God-fearing, do we know how many kings actually wrote a Torah scroll and where they were stored before the first exile? And, it goes on and on. But thank you, Google.
Okay, thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Gail.
Gail Googles, yay.
Giggle, Gail, and Google.
Yeah.
Okay.
I gotta leave.
Okay. Yes, we're over time. And any comments, Ruth Ann? Any?
Oh, just a quick one. Saw on Facebook. Thank you, Facebook. That it's Marty and Sue's anniversary. So first of all, happy anniversary.
Thank you
Oh,
so much.
congratulations.
Okay.
How many years?
55.
Wow.
Oh, my word.
Very, very nice. So happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Okay. Second, I found out about a new, I don't know, word or a phrase, a COVID version.
Version?
COVID
Is there such?
version. Oh, but wait, I can't even say it anymore.
I thought
For those
version
of us who haven't had COVID, okay. I went and looked at my COVID tests that I got from the post office way back when, and they looked like they had expired. So I sent for new tests, which just came in the mail today. Now they're giving 5 tests to a box instead of just 2. And then I was reading about how to dispose of expired ones, and they told me, oh, they probably have it expired. Just keep checking your manufacturer because they keep pushing the expiration dates back. So if anybody needs a test, it looks like I have a bunch of tests because I didn't know that it took the first time I sent it. So now I got multiple tests. So I got 5, 10, I got 20 tests in the mail today. So us COVID whatever. I hope to never use them. So if you need one, let me know. I got.
Okay, you're
I
not going to
ordered
live
mine. They're on
down
the way.
your little malaprop there. Anyway, everyone, Shabbat Shalom and have a great week.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, everyone.
Shalom Shabbat.